All right. Hello, everyone. I know that we have a few folks joining us live, but we'll have many more joining us on this recording. This is our annual state update. We do this by region to kind of give everyone a sense of what's going on, trends, and what we expect for the 2026 legislative cycle. Um, I am going to begin by talking a little bit about what the association is doing overall and then just a few quick federal updates, and then I'll shift it over to
Over.
Glenn Loop, who will go through the regional state basis. Um, Federally, it's pretty quiet. Obviously, there's the government is shut down currently. We are continuing to do our routine educational congressional meetings. We will cross over 100 this year. We had a strong presence with a recent event, fly-in with the women of PCA, where they had over 85 meetings. We talked a little bit in those meetings, just the basics of premium cigars, the industry, the retail sector, small business issues, but also dove into a little bit about the tariff situation. I also met with the National Economic Council at the White House 2 weeks ago to express concerns about tariffs, given the product cannot be grown in the United States and cannot be produced to meet domestic consumption or demand. So, as trade policy is further developed in the next few months and into the new year, we are going to be looking for any angle to see reductions. I think principally where 60% of premium cigar tobacco coming from Nicaragua, that 18% tariff, we would at least like to get it back to the 10% standard tariff, if not eliminate it altogether. The Dominican Republic obviously has a positive trade deficit with the United States. We'd love to see that eliminated as well. So we've expressed that with the administration and some of our congressional allies. We are releasing it later this year a study that Glenn will get into a little bit, but one of the components of the study will be the effects of tariffs on the premium cigar industry. We're expecting that to be released sometime in November. For state associations, it's important to note that the PCA has renewed our grant program. This is something that's available to existing state associations. There's an application on our website, but also for new state associations. If your state does not have one, Glenn has, diligently over the past 3 years been setting up new state associations, incorporating them, and the PCA will pay for legal fees, printing, basic needs to get those set up. So if you're not connected with your state association, please reach out to Glenn. Or if you'd like to start a new state association, please also reach out to Glenn for that. We have created a guide. Our team and Glenn and I met earlier today. We'll be overhauling our advocacy portal, which is Cigar Action, to make it more accessible and user friendly. So we hope to have some of those developments done in October and November. Um, Beyond that, taxation front federally, kind of on hold there. We're not seeing the significant movement like we've had in uh, other administrations where it's been included in budgets. So, we're trying to inoculate ourselves from that. I had two meetings this week with Senate Democratic offices, really um, in preparation for any changes. Our issues are a bipartisan issue set, so we want to get in front of Democrats and Republicans, no matter who's in power at any given time, because these issues fluctuate. It's an interesting phenomenon in the House of Representatives federally. House Republicans are better than House Democrats, and Senate Democrats are actually better than Senate Republicans on premium cigar issues. So not always just a kind of black and white issue set, at least at the federal level. And I think it's very similar in Glenn's realm in the state world. Um, Another new program that I think is worth noting, and I didn't note it yesterday in our trainings. PCA is also running a new pilot program with WeCard for retailer employees to receive training on age verification. This is something that, make sure you're on the lookout for that email. We are going to pay for the first 100 registrants for this course, and see how that goes. And we might buy another allotment. My hope is to then be able to go to the Food and Drug Administration and other regulators and really claim in, a 2 year span, PCA has facilitated age verification training for, let's say, 500 or 1,000 retail employees. That's a good talking point for the association, but is also important in a lot of states. If your employees take this training, they will receive, if you are caught selling underage a product in a sting operation, there are lesser penalties for folks that have taken those training courses. And a lot of times there's updates there. So you can go to the website WeCard. It's theirs, it's proprietary, but we've established a new partnership that is currently unannounced right now. You are the first group that is finding out about that. So I will turn it over to Glenn to kind of go over the state overview of where things stand here.
Thanks, Josh. What I'm going to do is break this up into two parts. The first part is the state by state crystal ball of where we see issues coming about in the 2026 state legislative season. And then, secondly, to that, we'll go over a collection of strategies and organizational matters on how to approach these issues in your respective state. Uh, so I'll just go. What's interesting is sort of a preamble. I don't mean to jump around, but uh, last night we did the northeastern part of the country and the south. And northeast, we have issues in every single state. That's I don't need to go through the list. You know where they are, but it's everything from Maryland to Maine. We have, and some of them are good issues, like cigar bar legislation in Maryland. That's positive. Cigar bar legislation in New York. That's positive. I just throw these out as examples, but we have issues in every single state. In the South, it's only about five, actually three states with serious issues in one form or another. And the Midwest that we're talking to tonight is sort of a split decision right down the middle, but you're now second to the northeastern part of the country as far as having issues. We Josh and I talked about this last night, but I guess we're sort of setting an expectation because of what's going on at the federal level. Is that this was the first year, and Vince knows this, this is the first year since COVID that there's been tax increase proposals at all. Up until till the 2025 legislative season, states were running flush with cash. Everybody was running a surplus. Um, then we'll get into the two of the three states that experienced the opposite of that this year. But there were tax increase proposals in North Dakota and South Dakota this year. Um, so we kind of anticipate them to be back again. And it goes back to why there's this new proliferation of tax increase proposals. And that is the states are being hit with what's being called the big shift from the HR1 big beautiful bill, using their terminology, not mine. It's shifting it, simply shifting the financial responsibility from the federal government to the states, and that's causing a huge deficit in Medicaid mandates in the states. And they're all about to get a serious bill from the federal government come January. And I'll just give you a quick example of my home state here. In the last 45 days, and I think this is indicative of what's happening across the country. In the last 45 days, the anticipated bill to to close the Medicaid mandates has gone from 650 million to 2.1 billion. Now, in a state, that's a lot of money. In the federal government, that's a rounding error. So that's just one example. And it's going to be happening nationwide. So I'm sort of tempering expectations, if you will, as to what we can anticipate. Because when states, and again, I look at my friend Vince on this, when states are confronted with billion-dollar bills, invoices to cover Medicaid mandates, they begin to do what? Look under every conceivable rock for every conceivable dollar. And I just simply anticipate that to be the case again come January. But back to our state list, that's the reason I say North Dakota and South Dakota had tax increase proposals this year, but they quickly died. In fact, in South Dakota, we had a retailer driving from the store to the Capitol to give testimony, and he got a call halfway between his store and the Capitol saying, "Just turn around, we've killed it." True story. But the next one is that a positive piece of legislation that was broached and done some planning work on, but it's going to be coming forth in a very serious fashion in January, and that's a tax cap proposal for the state of Nebraska. Our board member Tony Goins has been spearheading this effort. He has already rounded up legislative sponsors of the legislation, and we'll chat more about how the tax cap study fits into that legislation there and across the country. But that'll be a positive measure to advocate for in the state of Nebraska come January. Kansas, we do not. Matter of fact, Kansas is the only state in the Midwest that we anticipate no issues. It is the only one with, I'm hoping North Dakota and South Dakota join that club. But unless a tax proposal rears its head, I think Kansas should be calm. Oklahoma, there was a short-lived effort this year to empower local governments to have increased authority and regulatory powers over tobacco. It was very short-lived, didn't get any traction, but we put it out there because you never know when it might resurface. Minnesota, it's always a threatening environment there, and we have our good friend and ally in the legislature, Representative Jim Nash, in the Minnesota legislature, who knows every Democrat and Republican that smokes a cigar, and he's a great watchdog for us in the Minnesota legislature, and unapologetically a cigar smoker in the in the legislature. But every year it's a threat to remove the tax cap, which is a lifeblood of the retail community in Minnesota, and tax increases. So Minnesota is one of those states, like so many others, that you simply can't take your eye off of them for 1 minute. In Iowa, it's a case of protecting its existing tax cap. In Missouri, there is consistently for the last several years pro and con legislation on local authority. There is always these collection of competing bills where one side says we're going to give regulatory and tax authority to local governments, and then competing legislation that says no local government can enact anything stronger than that of the state. And they end up competing and nothing happens. Well, in a perfect world, nothing happens. Gridlock can work to our advantage sometimes, and that might be a case that even though we would like to get the preemption legislation through, and there's several states that have been trying that are good models, and we have legislative models for preemption. And by preemption, I mean the traditional language that local governments can't do anything stronger than that of the state. We have example of that where it was went through the legislature and signed by the governor in South Carolina, and it's going to be attached to a regulatory bill in North Carolina in the coming months. Wisconsin, um, there is cigar bar legislation to allow the lifting of the moratorium on cigar bar licenses. And just in the last less than 45 days, about closer to 30 days, that legislation successfully got through the assembly. And we have a wonderful patron of that legislation in the Wisconsin legislature who feels very passionately about it. Um, but it's got a very much an uphill climb in the Wisconsin State Senate, and it's not exactly being embraced with the warm fuzzies by the governor's office. But in a very, I think it's indicative of where it could go. It passed the House with a very, very bipartisan majority. In Wisconsin, we raised this issue simply because it's been rearing its head of late. We've issued a public statement about this to the Wisconsin retailers, is that there is, I'll just use the term rogue as a gentle descriptor of an agent of the state who's going around and telling retailers that they can no longer smoke in their shops and that they're not in compliance with the Clean Indoor Air Act. And that's if a store has changed hands. Well, in Wisconsin, if a store changes hands, the smoking permit goes with the ownership, not the establishment. So there's been some shops that have been very, very needlessly, um, I'll just say, harassed, uh, really worried about the future of smoking in their establishments. So what we've done is we worked with our friend Paul Grow and his wife to be able to instruct retailers on how to basically document the right of succession of their respective shops and encourage the retailers to keep that information on file in case an agent of the state ever shows up and questions their ability to have smoking in their shops. Um, the cigar bar legislation would actually take care of that for a lot because it only does one simple thing. It scratches out the predicate date that you had to be in business in order to have smoking pre Clean Indoor Air Act. So I throw all of that out for our Wisconsin friends that'll be watching this broadcast later. In Michigan, there was recently in the last 10 days introduced a anti-tobacco package. The target is really vape and e-cigarettes, but all things nicotine kind of get swept up into these. And when you start talking about tax and regulatory measures in the OTP category, premium cigars and pipe tobacco can get swept up into that. We don't think it'll have any traction. We have some strong, strong allies in the Michigan legislature, including the Speaker of the House, who was the original sponsor of the tax cap measure in the state of Michigan, by the way. This is a piece of political trivia. And there's also cigar bar legislation in the works in Michigan as well, similar to that bill that I mentioned in Wisconsin. Ohio, there was a tax increase proposal up until the 11th hour of this year's legislative session. It went literally to the wire, similar to what we'll talk about in Indiana. But in Ohio, the governor proposed it, Republican governor DeWine proposed it. It was touch and go on whether or not the Ohio legislature was going to pass that proposed tax increase this year, but it was fended off by allies in the legislature. I'm just not going to be shocked at all if a similar proposal isn't back and in the governor's budget. Also, in Ohio, we have to be concerned about flavor bans, both at the local level and state level, because of a state court decision that said the legislature can't preempt the local authority on these measures. That is still, I believe, tied up in litigation. So the flavor debate spans the local governments as well as the state government in Ohio. Illinois, 11th hour tax increase, one of three, Illinois, Indiana, and Maine, that passed this year. It was an ugly situation after the governor had pledged no tax increases this year. That was obviously reneged on. Uh, but there's going to be a serious, serious effort to counter that this year with the reintroduction of tax cap legislation that includes the remote sellers tax measure attached to it in the state of Illinois. It'll be an attempt for a 50-cent tax cap. Um, there's some negotiating room in that. We think that the state can come back with something higher, but we want to aim for that 50 cents. And the remote sellers measure that's attached to the cap obviously gives the state the ability to collect tax on internet sales of cigars, similar to what has been passed in approximately 15 states. And there's going to be a collection of those types of measures this year as well. So that brings us to our friends in Indiana, which at the 11th hour also passed a tax increase with a Republican House, Republican Senate, and a Republican governor. When we had our event with the American Legislative Exchange Council gathering when they were in Indianapolis uh, earlier, late this summer, I believe it was. Indiana's got a strong cigar caucus within their legislature. We were talking to them at the gathering there. We had a Rocky Patel's burn in Indianapolis. And like so many of these situations, like what happened in Illinois and to some degree in Maine, but it definitively happened in Indiana, is that this was the words of the legislators that came to our gathering. It comes down to what four people do in a closet, working out a budget deal, and then plop it down on the desk at midnight on a Friday night and say, this is what you've got to vote on. I'm not exactly paraphrasing that. That's almost a verbatim regurgitation of what the way legislators conveyed it to me. And that's not unusual. I hate to say that, but that's not unusual in a lot of state legislatures where budget conferees, which are the all-powerful members on the budget writing committees, drag things out until the 11th hour, then deliver it to the desk of the members and say, we've got 20 minutes to debate this. We got 30 minutes to debate this. You've got an hour. You don't have any time. It could be any and all of the above. This is what you've got to vote on. This balances the budget. Indiana had been hit with a serious Medicaid hole in their budget of, I think, Vince, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was right at $1 billion. I think it was right at $1 billion.
Yes, I believe you're right.
And, they said we don't have any choice but to balance the budget as states have to do constitutionally. Um, and that's what passed. Now, we feel strongly that there will be proactive legislation to both. In addition to the tax increase, they raised the tax cap from $1 to $3, which is going to be so regressive on the cigar patrons and shops of Indiana that most assuredly someone's going to be sponsoring legislation to, one, roll back the level of that cap, and two, roll back the tax. Um, up until I think 3 days before the vote, I was on the phone with a member of the governor's policy staff. And up until 3 days before that vote was taken, they thought it was cigarettes only. And so, like in a lot of these situations, the information gets in the crosshairs, and one side thinks they've got the answer, and the other one thinks they're right, and you don't know what's going on in the conferee's cloakroom, and that's how these things happen. So it really could not have been prevented by any one entity. It's one of those 11th hour measures that hits everybody between the eyes, and that's what happened in Indiana, Illinois, and Maine. And we're hoping that type of action doesn't occur again in the 2026 legislative cycle. So that covers the state of affairs in the 13 states in the Midwest that we've marked off as the Midwest. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go through some organizational types of issues. One is the importance of a state association. In the Midwest, I look at my list. There's a organizational effort in Missouri, Wisconsin, Phil Ledbetter is going to be picking up the mantle and putting the pieces together for the state association in Illinois. There's a very active group in the state of Michigan and Ohio. And Vince, we just got to get Indiana together. We've had this dialogue. We've had interim boards. Um, our friend at Rudy's is willing to carry the shoulder the burden for a while. We'll talk about that sometime, but we got to get them together out there. And we've got a new group that's up and running in Iowa. Their significance will come when it's presidential season and everybody goes through every single cigar shop in the state of Iowa. And a new group that'll be coming together to back the effort in Nebraska. It's important to note that the state association is not only the conduit to the state capitol, but also to city halls, county governments, and to your congressional federal delegation. In states, like Iowa, where there's not a lot of state issues, or North Dakota or South Dakota, may not be a lot of state issues, but that it's important for us to be able to link retailers with their members of the United States Congress and the United States Senate on federal issues when needs arise. So really the state association helps us at all three levels of government. Secondly, this time of year, like right now, legislator outreach is absolutely critical. Every cigar shop in the country needs to know who their members of city council, county government, state legislature, and Congress are. And those members need to know you on a first name basis. And I'm not kidding about that. You need to call them, you need to write them, you need to introduce yourself, you need to visit their district offices, you need to know their staff. This is the only way for us to strengthen our network and our level of political influence. So nothing irks me more, and I've had this happen on more than one state, where I'll call a retailer because they've got a member that's important to a given bill, and I'll say, "Do you know Representative Smith?" And they'll say, "Who?" I don't want to hear who. I want to hear his birthday. I want to know that where his kids go to school and where they like to have dinner on Friday night. So it's just in the places that we've been the most successful, a retailer or a collection of retailers have had that type of relationship. You're the constituent, we're the hired gun. They'd rather hear from you. So just I cannot state strongly enough the role of having that type of outreach and working relationship with your members of the legislature. Know your issues, know your tax issues, know your regulatory issues, know the ones that could be beneficial to you. Fourthly, invite them to your shop. Conduct a cigar town hall. Let them see the customers that you attract into your shops. Let them see the demographic that is sitting in a traditional American cigar shop. Let them learn about your small business. What? Let them see what type of a small business you represent. Let them get to know you. Let them see that you actually have a constituency, a bona fide constituency that backs your small business. Next is our cigaraction.org portal. It is our conduit to conveying and keeping all of our network apprised of what's going on politically. It works in real time. When a bill gets introduced that's positive or negative, it allows us to instantaneously convey that information to the shop, and then you subsequently can convey it to your customers. Which brings me to the next point. Cigaraction.org needs to be have a space on every cigar shop website in the country. Encourage your customers to sign up to it. It is the way when we trigger a petition, it is the way we reach a critical mass of grassroots outreach. so that we can convey our message pro and con to members of the legislature. So buildingupcigaraction.org as a political tool for the industry is absolutely critical. Plan a Capitol Hill day. Get your brethren legislators together. Pick a day where you're all going to go to the Capitol, go door to door, meet with your respective legislators, whether you have issues or not. And I've seen this with special interest groups all over the country. Whether you have issues or not, make your presence felt. Go visit your members of the legislature, go door to door, pick out key committees. We can work with you on targeting, on who you should be meeting with in addition to your own personal legislators. But having a Capitol Hill Day is a wonderful tool in advocacy. Coalition building. Build alliances with like-minded constituencies, whether it's a Chamber of Commerce, unless you're the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, don't talk to them. I've never seen such a chamber dominated by the healthcare industry, but that's just, I say that just because Vince is on this call. But I swear, know who your friends are. But there's a lot of small business advocacy groups that are out there, a lot. And it may be your local chamber. It may be your state chamber. It may be your state chapter of Americans for Tax Reform or Americans for Prosperity or the National Federation of Independent Businesses. There's a lot of alliances that can be built to make us stronger in capitals. And lastly, I want to chat about our tax cap study. And it's being done by an economist based in the Midwest. Dr. Ernie Goss is with the Creighton University as a professor of economics, and he has Goss and Associates Consulting. And they are doing diligent work at producing our national tax cap study. This study is going to hopefully demonstrate the virtue of tax cap legislation nationwide. It's going to document the bleed that states are losing, tax revenue bleed that they're losing when your rates are higher than those of your surrounding states. It's going to hopefully demonstrate the virtue of the 15 states that have already enacted tax caps, and it's going to address the role of high taxation of tobacco products, because we know for a fact that the cigar constituency, the cigar consumers of America, are a very cost conscious, discerning group. They will find a way to get the product cheaper. And whether they do it online or they do it in surrounding states, they will find a less expensive alternative. And that only hurts small businesses in your respective state. So this study is going to hopefully highlight all of this with real numbers. And we've seen preliminary numbers on what it means to Illinois and New York and Virginia. I think those are the ones from the preliminary side we've seen, but it's going to be a state by state analysis. And so that we're working with our brethren at the Cigar Association of America on funding that study, and we think it'll be done in the next 30 to 45 days. So with that, I will shut up and be glad to take any questions the group may have.